You want to drug test me? Bet. I just don't understand how corporations can just shoot themselves in the foot like this. It honestly boggles the mind. The corporation that signs my paycheck is technically a hospital. Said hospital, to absolutely no one's surprise, developed a bad case of medical staff strategically misplacing certain medications. Some genius decides the heads-up play here is going to be a universal drug testing policy. I am not medical staff. I don't even work in the hospital. My position is remote. Things need to have gone catastrophically sideways before I'm assisting at the hospital. That's happened precisely once. And even then I was just carrying stretchers in an emergency situation. I got an email from HR. You've been randomly selected for a drug screening. Please arrive at this time at this place so someone can watch you piss in a cup. Thanks so much for your understanding. Please note, there are no exemptions from this test. If you must reschedule, please call this number. Said message was sent to me last Tuesday. Test was for Thursday. Honestly, I understand the necessity. I get it. Patients need their pain meds. They need to get a handle on the situation. But there are better ways to go about it. So I forwarded the email I got from Our to my manager and said something along the lines of, "It's been lovely working with you, but there's no way in hell I'm getting a clean test." She replied with a 4-letter word not used in polite company. Why am I going to fail? Because the drug test wasn't looking specifically for opiates. It was looking for everything. I'm not doing anything illegal in my state, but the automated process is going to have kittens about my results. I'm on prescribed ADHD medication. I use marijuana edibles to counteract the insomnia from the ADHD meds. I've been drinking a buttload of water every day, and using a creatine supplement in the copious amounts of water I'm drinking. May or may not have opted to eat an everything bagel on the way in as well. Just for giggles. If I'm going to fail it, might as well do it upright. Occasionally poppy seeds will false positive a drug test for opiates. Or at least it used to. Not sure if it still does. Any one of those things would throw the numbers off enough for a false positive or just a regular positive. Which policy defines as grounds for termination regardless of local laws. Because reasons. Yay. So I showed up at the right place at the right time. Waited in a long queue with lots of other jittery employees. And then it was my turn. Wound up in a room with a man whose face said, "I have seen entirely too many dicks today." And it was only 11 a.m. We sat down in a hastily prepared space for this. Just a room with a couple chairs, a table, and a rather smelly chemical toilet in the corner. We sit down. He asks me for my name and department. Confirms I am who I said I am and that I appeared as requested. And then he said the magic words. "Do you have any questions for me?" Quote, I shook my head and said, "It was nice working here." He quirked an eyebrow but didn't say much. And then we got to stand there uncomfortably for a while. I've got a shy bladder and he needed to see the pee leave me and enter the cup. Bit of a coin flip for who was more uncomfortable about it. Pretty sure it was him. Eventually I produced enough of a sample to suit. He wrote my name on the cup. And I was free to go. Turns out when you can process the samples in-house, the turnaround time is pretty quick. I left that place at around 11:30 on Thursday. And 9 a.m. the next day, all of my accounts were disabled. Access revoked. I had way too many meetings for a Friday and couldn't attend a single one. That was awful. Just awful. Texted my manager. I think I'm fired. Can't access anything. This time the 4-letter word was in all caps. Didn't hear much else from anyone on Friday. Got a text message this morning from my manager that my access had been restored. Logged in to check my email. And there were a whole bunch of people I was supposed to be meeting being like, "So you coming?" Quote, the most recent emails though? Sent Saturday morning? The first. The VP of HR has decided to explore opportunities elsewhere. By Felicia. The second. Any employees with drug tests still pending are no longer required to submit samples for testing. And any employees who had been tested previously and suspended have been reinstated. We appreciate your patience while we addressed this situation. Apparently almost 30% of the employees tested failed and were immediately suspended pending termination. The ratio was a lot higher for the actual medical departments and IT staff. This had two effects. The first being the actual purpose of a hospital being a hospital was compromised by this idiotic policy, and Friday turned out to be what is politely called a dumpster fire. The second being several IT people who were grossly underqualified for what they were being told to do wound up on the bad side of HIPAA because they didn't know any better. Pretty sure a whole boatload of lawyers in my area just got gainfully employed for a long time over this. A couple were really bad. I don't think anyone died. But I know for a fact that several time-sensitive surgeries were postponed due to a lack of staff. Mostly because my boss was one of the doctors that would be, doing the surgeries. And he had a few get moved to a different slot because there wasn't a full and qualified OR team to be found. My ADHD meds set off the drug tests I take at work. When it happens, if I'm working at the refinery or a mill, power plant or factory, I get sent home. I don't go back until the testing company and my doctor get things straight. Used to take 5 days. Now it's usually 3 or less. I get paid for all scheduled hours while I wait. I love getting drug tested. Any zero tolerance policy always has unexpected side effects. The U.S. Marines in their infinite wisdom decided years ago to place a logistics warehouse on cheap to purchase property, which happened to be in the desert at a charming place called 29 Palms. I had a friend who years ago was a helicopter mechanic at this resort, and the commander decided that the entire base was going to get a surprise urine screen. There was no entertainment to speak of in the nearest town. So as one might imagine, over half the base failed for marijuana use. This meant that there was no practical way to punish anyone. So, they decided that everyone would get a one-time pass. But that going forward they would randomly take piss tests every week. Nobody failed after that. But my friends said that those who were so inclined began to use psilocybin mushrooms instead of weed. Haha damn. Worked for a company in California 8 years ago. They wanted a drug test, but made me take it 30 days after I started because they were convinced that, being from Seattle, everyone was stoned. Remote? Y'all can arrange for someone to come and catch my piss. What's the 4-letter word? Your prose brings me life. Let's get high. This is a great story and you told it so well. Laughed my head off. So you had IT people underwater, disabling accounts, and getting tested, then being fired at the same time as those other violations. I hope some of them walk just for the inconvenience. I love how Mangerment always keep using the same hammers to solve all their problems even though those tools are seldomly relevant. Fisher-Price my first leadership role. I don't get why you needed to have a monitored test. In the US, you have to have a court mandate for that. I've worked at hospitals for a long time and never had anybody watch me urinate. Stories like this just warm my cold black heart tears of joy. You should post this in our malicious compliance. This is perfect for them. Fascinating read. I worked for a healthcare company and had to have a hair test. We were in an office building. And no medicines of any kind were there. The testing company messed up, and I had to go in for a second hair test. I was so pissed about the whole thing. Wish I had never worked there. The employment drug screens I've had have usually included a form to list any medications, foods, or supplements you may have taken, consumed that could be a concern. So, ADHD meds with a prescription would be fine. But my company has a no cannabis policy in a state that has legalized cannabis. It makes hiring staff extra challenging. Reminds me of a rumor at my work some years ago. Office job. They have tested at time of hiring for years but never bothered with it after someone was hired. Supposedly the rumor goes that the VP in charge of the office but was off-site most of the time. Asked the AVP, who is on site every day, what he thought would happen if they started testing the current workforce. The AVP supposedly replied along the lines of, "You will lose a load of good people." The issue was dropped. What remote job do you have for a hospital? Medical coding or cybersecurity? My employer quietly stopped for testing for THC lol. I tested positive for amphetamines a few times because of my prescribed Adderall. It was no big deal. I gave them my doctor's name and phone number, then never heard anything again. The occupational health doctor said, it's essentially a negative test, because the Adderall was prescribed. Every time we are short-staffed and a new round of random tests are required. I'm on the list along with Carrie. It is known by our employer that Carrie and I don't do anything. Even drink alcohol. That would show up on a test random my ass. We have them for years, nothing very special about it. Man shrugging. Same goes for alcohol. You can't have in your blood the moment you are in the building due to heavy equipment and very costly parts. Federal required as part of the aviation world. This is by far my favorite anti-work post ever. I'm going to assume the four-letter word has something to do with country matters, in which I am surprised that person didn't get fired on the spot for using such a word in a professional setting twice.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.